Welcome to Hadar's Web, a podcast featuring community conversations on spirituality, healing, justice, and art. My name is Hadar Cohen. I am your host, and I am delighted to invite you to my relational web. Today's guest is Juliette Samman. Juliette Samman is a researcher specializing in decolonial studies with a focus on social justice and the Middle East. Her work is deeply intertwined with her identity as a French individual of Syrian heritage and her personal ties to Palestine, rooted in relationships and lived experiences. She is here to talk about the One Democratic State initiative. The One Democratic State solution is a political vision that identifies Zionism's settler-colonial endeavor as the root cause of suffering and violence in Palestine, and its politicization of identity as a danger to the cohesion and health of societies. It proposes a transition to one democratic state as the only possible solution. The One Democratic State initiative aims to mobilize individuals, entities, and political parties in Palestine and abroad behind such endeavor. Juliette joined a year ago based on her shared vision of what a free Palestine should look like. Welcome, Juliette. So glad to have you here.
Thanks. So glad to be here. Hi.
So I wanted to start by asking you to share a little bit more about this initiative that you are part of, the One Democratic State initiative. How did it come to be? When did it get started?
So it actually started recently. The initiative itself, the vision, One Democratic State, is much more older. It's actually existed even before the Nakba. So it comes from the acknowledgement of all, or at least in its current version, it comes from the acknowledgement that Zionism as a colonial project is inherently violent. And so to end the violence, we need to end colonialism and thus Zionism. I mean, it's a very aspects of this violence, such as daily oppression, dispossession, forced displacement that are really inherent to the colonial nature of the Zionist project. So again, to end this violence, we must end the colonial project, which means that there needs to be political alternative to Zionism. And that's where ODS, so One Democratic State, comes in. I will just specify to clarify, because sometimes I will speak about ODS and sometimes I will speak about ODSI. So ODS is the vision, it's the solution, one state, one democratic state solution. And ODSI, it refers to the One Democratic State initiative, which is the initiative that I'm also talking about. So here I'm more talking about the vision itself, so ODS. And I was saying before, this is not a new proposition. Its establishment, so the idea of the establishment of a democratic state in Palestine for all its citizens, as I was saying, it was even before the Nakba. So under the British mandate, as part of the liberation movement, also as a proposition to integrate Jewish immigrants from Europe before the Nakba. So it's really, it was always, or at least it was present for a very long time. And it was the main vision after the Nakba. So as the vision of the liberated Palestine until the PLO, so the Palestinian Liberation Organization, in the 70s adopted a new approach that was based on making concessions to the Zionist state. And after that, so ODS remained the vision for the liberation of Palestine for many Palestinians, but it was made less visible in the political sphere and it was rarely publicized. And so the initiative itself, so ODSI this time, comes from this constatation that there is this absence, that the proposition of ODS as a political solution is extremely relevant, that it is always here, but it is lacking organizing, let's say, especially at the point where we're seeing this extreme violence that we are seeing today. And it's also an answer to people who are concerned about what's going next, because when we liberate, but we don't specify to have what, this can also create concerns. And ODS really articulates the vision of liberation. So as one democratic Palestinian state, from the river to the sea, that doesn't exclude based on religion, ethnicity, etc. And as I was saying, it has always been the vision, but it got decentered, let's say, after the 70s and even more after Oslo. And so, although it's kind of everywhere, all the resistant factions and leaders mention it, but it needs to be more prominent in the discourse. So that's what the initiative is about, to be more vocal about it. And it was formed from all of these elements that I talked about. So the constatation that, well, obviously, colonialism is at the core of violence. That we need an alternative that kind of reviving ODS as the solution, and centralizing the efforts around it. So from all of these elements, there was actually, so the initiative started actually around a group of people who wanted to respond to these gaps and or to, let's say, direct their action towards the ODS vision. So they were kind of looking for organization or initiatives that worked on this project, and they couldn't really find one. So they created the initiative, so the One Democratic State Initiative, as a grassroots organization, so mostly from Lebanese and Palestinians initially, and that was in early 2023. So it's a very young initiative, and it was really this grassroots mobilization, with the objective to, let's say, well, translate the fact that a lot of people know about ODS into action. So mobilizing people, coordinating efforts to put this on the table. So that's in a nutshell a bit, the founding of ODS and the why this initiative.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. And yeah, I think the importance of articulating a political vision is very relevant, especially right now. And especially because sometimes it feels like, well, is there even any hope? But just the steps of bringing the vision, bringing the people together, trying to carve a way forward, even against impossible conditions. Yeah, it's really, really important, and it's really beautiful work. I wanted to ask a bit about how this vision for the one democratic and secular state came about, because when you listen, especially to a lot of mainstream Western media, the solutions that people propose are often two states, or, something around keeping Jewish supremacy. And then sometimes it gets into like, well, what will it be, an Islamic state, and all these other models. So can you share a little bit as specifically about why one democratic state as opposed to what we've been hearing for so long around this two-state vision?
So before diving into the different solutions or propositions that are being made today, I just want to stop a bit and discuss the concept of the politicization of identity, which is really core in what we in our vision at the One Democratic State. So the politicization of identity is this, let's say, these practices that give different representation, different rights, different or quota type of thing, or completely exclude or include people based on their identity. So this can be ethnical characteristics, religion, culture, language, or other, let's say, identity-based criteria. So it's the case of the Zionist project, which is a state exclusive to Jews. It's also the case of two states, which means, so basically it's the idea that we have one land, two two groups with different identities. So we just need to split the land and have one group on one land and the other on another one. So this politicization of identity is one thing that the one democratic state as a vision separates completely from it. It recognizes it as a cause of the violence because it's based on this principle that different identities cannot coexist equally in one space and in peace. So on the contrary, the one democratic state, so the vision, refuses the different proposals that discriminate so against non-Jews, which is the case currently what is being done in Israel, but also against Jews. So one state exclusive to Jews next to another exclusive of non-Jews, binational state, confederate state. These are all proposals that ODS position itself out of. So in the view of ODS, the state is here to administer the affairs of society. It's not a machine in the hands of identity groups against one another. So when we understand this, and that's why I talked about it before, mentioning the different propositions that are being made, when we had this framework in mind, obviously two states is not a solution. It will just reproduce this violence. It's still part of this rhetoric that identity groups need their own state. But some of the options that we are hearing under one state, which is, so for example, confederacy, binationalism, simply ending apartheid but keeping Israel, or as you were saying, an Islamic state. So what does it mean? Do they actually depoliticize identity, or is it just an update of the current practice? And in many cases, just an update of Zionism, actually. Many of them, they still rely on this politicization of identity. They still reproduce the model of, as I was saying, state as machines, so war machines, for instance, preventing the realization of the right of return, encouraging further colonization. Ultimately, they also leading to ethnic cleansing, because if you have one state in the hand of one group, there is this constant risk that there's going to be violence directed towards the other groups so that they leave. And for many of these options, I'm thinking binational state, confederacy, for instance, but others as well. So they do not end the colonial practice that we see in Israel, including the fact that indigenous people are either thrown or kept out, or at least replaced by settlers, the fact that citizens are treated differently on the basis of identity. So yeah, right now it's not so much the question of one or two states, because this, as I was saying, it became, I wouldn't say irrelevant, because unfortunately a lot of people, especially in the international sphere, kind of cling to it as the only acceptable solution, when it's actually, if you ask people on the ground, whether on one side or the other, nobody seems to want this. So, well, it's in this position where it's still discussed. It's not so much discussed by people of concern anymore. One of the questions that is central today is, so not one or two state, but a Jewish state or a democratic state, a colonial state or a decolonized state, a state that politicizes identity or a state that refuses to do so. And this is one of our objective of the at the ODSI, so at the initiative, is to make this question central and to kind of define liberation around or as a democratic Palestinian state. So based on different principles, so including secularism, social justice, democracy, etc., and a state that depoliticizes identities. So yeah, that's basically the let's say how we position ourselves compared to these other propositions that we hear.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And, certainly I resonate as someone who comes from an Arab Jewish lineage and just doesn't fit this two-state model. But there's just such a big gap, as you were saying, between the international conversation around, what is the solution? And it's usually people talk about two states, but that vision is long gone and not applicable. And as you're saying, not really what people on the ground are wanting. And I also just think about how, as you were speaking about the politicization of identity, whether it's like talking about things as Jews and Arabs or Jews and Palestinians or Jews or Muslims or however, which makes sense, right? Because as you were saying, it's like it's a Jewish supremacist system, so it's always going to be Jews against some group. But the reality is that Palestine has always been diverse of people, of so many different faiths and religions and tribes and cultures. It's not a monolithic place. I mean, you can talk about the Christian community, you could also talk about Baha'i community. So, and minority communities are oftentimes glossed over in these conversations. So, yeah, as you're saying, it's like the one democratic state is really the only viable solution that can, achieve some justice. Um, I want to ask you a little bit about how this initiative has been going. You said it's fairly young, but it seems like you've been mobilizing, Palestinians and people from all over the world to be part of it. So can you share a little bit about some of the progress and some of the challenges of this initiative?
Yeah, thank you. So overall, as you said, the progress have been pretty good, especially given the short time frame since which we've existed. Um, I, so I will speak a bit about the barriers first and the challenges. So one of the main obstacles that we have is related to mobilizing Palestinians in contexts where like most of them or a good portion, yeah, the majority of them actually live under oppressive regimes, and including Zionist regimes or facilitators of, of Zionist regimes, let's say. So this has been a major or a big obstacle, mostly because it slows things down. So it's not that people are not mobilized, but more that they cannot do as much as in other areas. So whether it's, for example, so the 48 territories, what's currently Israel, the West Bank, Jordan, where you have the majority of Palestinians that live. It's really hard to organize in conditions where they are under watch, and speaking about one state openly is not necessarily very safe. So a lot has to open anonymously. So obviously it slows things down, as I was saying. Like this is one element. Another one is that we have no funding. Actually, we refuse funds from states and from political movements. So we depend on individual fundings. So for things such as, for example, we try to have a good outreach towards Israeli citizens to also present what is the alternative that we propose. But to do so, because of our position, it's really difficult to do so without paid promotion. So these are the kind of things that it kind of hinders where we could have more outreach. But yeah, these are let's say these are important barriers, but they haven't stopped us from achieving very good results. We also face some resistance, not really from Palestinians in general, but abroad. and mostly related to this critique that ODS is utopian or non-realistic. You're speaking before about hope. It was making me think of this actually. And this is something that we have different responses to. One of them being that all successful movements in history, and especially like resistance or liberation movements, were utopians before they became real, and including Zionism, as a movement was unrealistic or utopian before it actually happened. The recent fall of Assad in Syria, for example. I mean, if you asked 2 months ago, I think nobody would have expected that this could happen like this. Everybody was thinking the direction that is like taking is more of a normalization or something like that, and then change happened. So, of course, currently the power balance is not in favor of ODS, but with this failure that we've talked about of the two-state proposal, the Israel's slide into fascism, and also the efforts of Palestinians and their allies, with all of this, the balance may change, and alternative is, can be strengthened by all of this. So this is the first aspect, is that even if it's like unrealistic, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. And the other thing is, even if it is utopian or unrealistic, so what? It doesn't mean that it's not worth fighting for, because right now what is realistic is genocide. So it's not so much, at least it's not about being utopian or not. It's about being acceptable or not, and desirable or not, and just or not, and then getting organized to make it happen. So yeah, that's really my answer to this, is like, you don't need to have hope, you just need to do things. um, so yeah. Another critique that we've had is that ODS is divisive, or speaking about ODS is divisive, for Palestinians, that we shouldn't speak about it because then we're going to fight over it. And this is, for us, kind of out of nowhere, because not out of nowhere, but things only divide us if we don't talk about it. There are always different visions. There will be different visions among Palestinians, like everywhere else. But it's when we don't talk about it that these visions remain separate. While when we speak, we can create a common ground. We can see where we can work together. So yeah, this is something that we really don't agree with. So these are the main, let's say, barriers or critiques that we faced. But as I was saying, it doesn't really stop us moving forward. The achievements are pretty good. We have a growing support. We have a declaration for tomorrow's Palestine that was signed by over 20,000 Palestinians. This month it's 20,600 something, which shows very strong support among Palestinians, that even surprised us in the beginning. We're not expecting to have such high numbers that fast. We also have growing number of signups. So these are people that it's not only that that they support us, it's also that they will sign up to our website, they share their contact information, they engage more, and some of them then will join and support. So last June it was about 1,600 signups, something like that. And we have an organized presence in different countries, in Palestine, in Lebanon, Jordan, Europe, North America, Latin America. So it's really, there is a growing number of supporters, and included in countries that are quite strategic, such as the US and Jordan. So this has all been really positive. And I think one of our successes is that we manage. So one of our objectives is to put, ODS on the table, and this is something that we are succeeding in doing, as part of also other, let's say, evolutions and movements. So this is really positive. The Tomorrow's Palestine Declaration shows this, that this is now, well, it's taking its central place that it had lost. Like, we are not there yet, but that's the direction that is being taken. And I'm not only speaking in terms of the people who become part of our network, but in general in the public narrative too. So now you find more references to ODS on social media, for instance, online in general, more than ever before. So this is definitely, a success. And then, I mean, so in terms of outreach, another element that has been quite positive is the outreach to Israelis, which is very strategic because we want to address this fear that their fear of the alternative, basically, of what would they have if we end colonialism. And we want to address this and say concretely what would be the alternative, and demonstrate that the approach of depoliticizing identities also means not in the initiative. Um, so, so to achieve that, we have content in Hebrew, for example. We wrote a letter to our Jewish allies, and we also have. So it's smaller numbers, but they are still very good given the context and dynamics. We have over 70 sign-ups that are Israeli. So yeah, this is all encouraging, and it's it's a strategic point for us.
Yeah.
Mm. And another aspect which is related to putting ODS on the table is also the outreach to public figures. So we were able to speak to different public, let's say, public figures, including Palestinian political figures, and have them so either endorse or at least discuss ODS, which is challenging because ODS is still non-hegemonic, which means that for people who are well known, they have a risk to endorse ODS publicly, even if they support it privately, which is the case of quite a lot of Palestinian leaders, actually. So what we can do to facilitate this is get them to talk about ODS. So not having this black and white, you endorse it or you don't endorse it, but just to have them speak about it, because then it's put on the table, even if it's not, endorsed, it is there. So we had interviews with Palestinian political leaders. They're on our YouTube channel, for instance. This summer, we also made a post on Instagram that showed quotes from different leaders, so past and present. For example, there was one from Osama Hamdan, who is a current Hamas representative, to show that this solution, this vision, is part of the narrative, is part of what is being discussed when we speak about Palestine. We also, so in terms of, let's say, official engagement or official endorsement, the declaration for Tomorrow's Palestine was signed by Salah, who is one of the founders of the PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So these different interactions that go from this endorsement, which is, let's say, the exception in the in this landscape, let's say, but also to simply speaking about ODS as part of a conversation. This all shows that ODS is part of the narrative among Palestinian political party, which is very important to us. And obviously talking to public figures, whether it's political representatives or or other public figures help making ODSI more and more public, which also helps us then have more and more people that can become part of the network. So yeah, these are the some of the things that we have achieved so far, that are, were either strategic or more successful, or really responding to our objectives, such as discussing with political parties and putting this narrative on the table.
Yeah, and what I like about ODSI is that there's been other kind of peace initiatives or dialogue initiatives that either position themselves as kind of apolitical, of just bringing people together to talk, or even if they are political, they don't necessarily take an anti-Zionist stance all the way. Like, they don't identify Zionism as a settler-colonial movement, and they don't talk about colonization all the way through. And yeah, I think it's pretty rare to find what you all are building, which is a very political vision, but one that's really rooted in equality as well. And you spoke a little bit about this, but I guess I'm curious to hear more about the reception from Palestinians and from Israelis or Jews. It sounds like it's been easier to get Palestinians on board than Israelis, which in some ways makes sense given the situation. But yeah, curious to hear a little bit more about how the reception has been, and what you're finding in the different responses between Palestinians and Israelis. And also, if you want to actually share on top of that, this is a double question because, yeah, I'm curious how you came to even want to engage with Israelis or Jewish people. And, you said that you wrote this letter to Jewish allies, which I read and I thought was really beautiful. But yeah, I'm curious because I've been to so many Palestine um, events and movements and things like that. And a lot of times when people talk about the solution, like outreach to Israelis or Jewish people, doesn't seem to be on the top list, which makes a lot of sense. But I'm curious that it feels like a strong priority for this initiative. So yeah, I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Thank you. So, I mean, there are things that I will not be able to respond to in terms of giving more details about the reception. For example, I don't really have all of this information. The reason why it's important for us to reach out to Israelis and to Jews, well, there are different reasons. The main one being, we can't call to depoliticize identities and not doing in our practice. So if we have the same objective and vision of democratic states, of Palestinian state, of post-Zionist reality, then, who cares if you're Jew, Hindu, Muslim, I don't know, like, regardless of religion, regardless of identity, like, this should not, it's not that it should not matter, is that we need to make it very clear in our practice that we don't, it's not just a talk that we are having, it's not just a narrative of, oh, don't worry, we're not going to exclude you. It's a practice. So it's also very strategic because it responds to a concern of a lot of people, of the after, and of facing violence. So, for example, in our different principles, we have democracy, the fact that there would not be the same, not be, sorry, unequal treatment depending on whatever basis, no discrimination. We have secularism. We also have the state of law as a core part of the identity of the ODS identity, ODS definition, meaning that, and in this we state clearly that the reparation for victims of dispossession, Palestinians victims of dispossessions, will not, and the law will ensure that it is not, that it does not lead to violence to Jews that have, decolonized themselves and that are now becoming Palestinians. So for us, it's important to address this concern, and so that it's not an unknown that comes next, but people know their options. They know that anti-Zionism doesn't mean that they are in danger. It might mean that they do not have a privileged position anymore, though. But yeah, it's strategic to have Israeli allies, because in the end of the day, we want a society with people who want to become Palestinians or who accept to leave and go somewhere else. But like, this option needs to be open. So this is a strategic element. Then in terms of the how to say of the reactions or the receptions of Israelis versus Palestinians, and then Jews outside of Israel, I don't really have the details. For sure, we have more supporters among Palestinians. It's also like a Palestinian grassroots movement. It's a movement, or let's say the vision itself is, as I was saying, the central in the Palestinian liberation movement. Then among Israelis, I don't really know what is the reception. I do know that, so we do this effort of outreach. I think that it's easier to reach Israelis that are already in a anti-Zionist or almost anti-Zionist position, because that's the networks that we can have access to. But yeah, I don't really have the details.
Thanks for sharing. If people wanted to get involved and support, whether internationally, whether they're Palestinian or Jewish, or what's the best way to support and get involved?
Thank you. So I mean, as I was saying before, our objective is to put ODS, so the vision, on the table, so to kind of center the discussion around it, and reclaim the narrative. So for this, we work at different level. We work around, let's say, everything media, social media related. So this is mostly, visibility, making this in the public discourse. We also do field work, so organizing events, taking part in protests, using visuals, so banners, flyers, stickers, etc. And then we do political networking. So this is mostly reaching out to political movements, pro-Palestinian groups, to put ODS as part of their narrative and their action. So everyone who aligns with our vision basically is encouraged to take part in these actions or in this effort. And this can be on their own, so by talking about ODS, because as I was saying, the point is also to put this on the table. So sharing our content, these kind of things. And then it's also possible to join the initiative. So this will, let's say, reach more of it's more of an organized ways of mobilization, obviously, and not only individual. And it's very easy to do. We have on our website, it's possible to sign up. And when we sign up, so we can, I think it's called Get Involved. And then you have a box that says like, I would like to help or something like that. So it's very easy process. And when you tick this box, basically a coordinator for the region that you're in reaches out to you. So for people who want to join the initiative, they can do it this way, and then they get involved as much as they'd like. So this is discussed with the coordinator that contacts them. And the idea is to see well, how much the person can and is willing to be involved, what kind of activities or actions they would like to do, etc. So this is really the process. We also encourage people to read and share our material. and yeah, that's it. And then of course, if people want to discuss more in depth about certain principles or have comments, they can always interact with us. We have comment sections on our social media, on our website. They can also email us, so it's really easy to interact with us. And yeah, we really encourage everyone to read about ODS and to contribute to this effort to putting it, central in the narrative, make it clear what we are fighting for, and also responding to certain concerns that a lot of people have, Jews and non-Jews actually. So
Yeah. So just to remind folks, what is your website?
it's, let me just double check. It's odsi.co.
And people can follow you on Instagram as well, right?
Yeah, Instagram is ODS Initiative. Um, and then we also have, the YouTube is also ODS Initiative. I mean, the name of the channel is One Democratic State Initiative, and the at is ODS Initiative.
Great. Thank you. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to share?
If you'd like, I can also kind of detail the different principles of
Yeah,
ODSI.
sure.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, we have this. I mean, it's centered around the idea of depoliticizing identity in opposition to Zionism. But there are also different principles that show basically, okay, we dismantle the colony. What happens next? And for this, we have 5 characteristics of what the state that comes next would be. So the first one is that it's a Palestinian state, because, as I was saying, we identify the root cause of violence as colonialism, because of its conception of states as war machines in the hands of a small group. So decolonizing means removing the settler-colonial entity, which is Israel, and going back to the indigenous states, which is Palestine. And it's important because today, as I was saying, Israel is not using the two states rhetoric. We only speak about one state model. So the question is, should this be a settler state exclusive to Jews, or a decolonized and Palestinian states for all citizens? So this is really one of the main elements, also because it's the only solution that honors the rights of Palestine to self-determination and the right of return. So this is the first aspect. The second one is that it's a democratic state. So it's a state, as we talked about, for all citizens, regardless of their religion, of their ethnicity, culture, language, sex, gender, etc. This means that it also extends citizenship to Jews who have broken free of Zionism and wish to remain Palestinians. So this is also very important, and it's in this vision, all citizens are equal in the eyes of the state, which also means the law, institutions, policies, etc. So that's the second principle. The third one is secularism. So ODS is a secular state, which means that, okay, it's based on the separation of religion from politics. It safeguards the freedom of belief, the right to practice religion. But it also means that religious, ideological, cultural backgrounds, etc., will not be a factor in granting or denying rights and citizenship. It's also what we emphasize is that ODS is also a project of a socially just state. So with institutions that are built on principle of economic social equality that addresses poverty, marginalization, provides education, social welfare, etc., and also includes restitution to victims of dispossession. And kind of so the how to do this, and that's what I was talking about also, is that it is a state of law. So that means that Zionism is criminalized by law. It also means that it ensures rights to all without exceptions, including the right of return, the right of compensation. It ensures achieving justice, but also it protects against new injustices. So it ensures that that the justice for Palestine does not result in new injustices at the expense of the Jewish population that has dropped their colonial privileges. So the law is here to protect this also, to make sure that that all are equal, privileged are abolished, but there is not further injustice that are being perpetrated. So yeah, these are the five, the four, sorry, 3, 4, 5 principles that are what we propose as a alternative. You know, it's not just saying we want a democratic state that depoliticizes identity. Is also concretely there's a project behind it, a vision of the future for Palestine. It's a bit more detailed in the declaration. It's also available on our website, the Tomorrow's Palestine Declaration, that really outlines this. So yeah, that's the vision.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'm so impressed by how well thought out everything in the initiative is, and yeah, well articulated the principles are. And yeah, it really is a vision, a very strong vision.
Yeah, I mean, it's been here for a long time, you know. As I was saying,
Yeah.
it was, of course, strengthened by and updated, but a lot of these principles were actually already here. Um, and yeah, there has been generations of thinkers now who have been writing about ODS or fighting for it. So there are, let's say, um, roots and a strong basis from which we can develop the vision.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with such depth and detail about ODSI. Definitely encourage folks to check it out and support. Yeah, are there final thoughts or offerings you want to share?
No, nothing special. Just inviting people to, as you just said, you know, to check our content, see if this is something that speaks to you, and otherwise nothing. Just thank you so much for this opportunity.
Of course, yeah. It's such a pleasure to support you all and excited to see how it continues to grow and evolve. Thank
Great,
you.
thanks.